Hey and welcome Zen friends to the first ever series of Beyond the Care Sheet. This is an independent series by Zen Habitats where we interview every single episode, a new and really exciting, informative expert in some kind of species. Today we are going to be speaking to Mariah Healey, who will be joining us to speak to us very excitingly about blue-tongued skinks. So we're just going to hang out for a little while and wait for Mariah to join us. Then we've got plenty of awesome questions to ask her. And if you also have any questions that do happen to come to mind, be sure to drop them down below and we'll be periodically popping in and out to see if we can't answer some of those questions. Oh my goodness, look how many of you have been arriving. We have Lynn's Lizards over here. We have Addie's.animals. Hello, Addie. We have Exotics who says hello. Well, hello with a big smiley face. Of course, we've got Tyler Rugge in here who says hi. And that's how I imagine him saying it, is hi. And I also see that Maddie is in here as well. How exciting. Oh my goodness. Oh, and I can see Reptifiles has just joined us. So please join me in welcoming her because I'm honored to have her on. Mariah, do we have you here? Have you joined us? I see you. Hello, Mariah.
Hello.
How are you doing this evening?
I'm good. How about you?
Good, thank you. Whereabouts are you based?
Well, right now I'm in my reptile room. Did you want a more specific answer than that?
Are you East Coast or West Coast?
I'm in the Rocky Mountains area, based in Utah.
Wow. Oh, that's so exciting. If anybody else is based in the same area, be sure to leave a comment down below. We've got tons of our Zen friends saying hi to you. And Mariah, I have to ask, what first of all drew you to the blue-tongued skink?
Oh man. Well, I think it was just their personality, and I've always thought that the skink body type is really funny looking and therefore cute. A good friend of mine, you probably know him, Clint with Clint's Reptiles.
Yes.
Is we were looking to get our another reptile. He urged us to get our first bearded dragons, and he had a blue-tongued skink that we just fell in love with. So we started to look into potentially adding that to our family, and one thing led to another, and we ended up taking on a rehome.
Wow. Oh my goodness. That's such a great introduction to blue-tongued skinks. And Mariah, for those of you who are watching today who don't know about you and what you do, tell us a little bit about Reptifiles.
So Reptifiles is where I publish my, for lack of a better word, research on reptile husbandry. So my area of focus and study is helping reptiles do better in captivity. It's kind of similar to what zoos do, but I'm taking the information that zoos use for captive conservation programs, and I'm applying it, or I'm trying to apply it to the pet.
Wow.
Is my goal.
And that's a pretty tall order because there's a lot of misinformation out there, as I'm sure you are well aware of. And with that in mind, I would love to just ask some of these questions, which some of our Zen friends have asked, if you'd be so kind as to help with answering some of these questions. How does that sound to you?
No problem.
Amazing. So, first of all, Casey's Critters asks, what is the best substrate for a northern blue-tongued skink?
My favorite substrate for a northern blue-tongued skink, it really depends on your local climate, actually. Some people who live in more humid climates can definitely get away with drier substrates. I see recommendations for aspen a lot. One nice thing about aspen shavings is that they're very fluffy, and so they offer a good burrowing medium, actually. The thing I don't like about aspen shavings is they are very dusty, and even though they're easy to replace, and they're burrowable. They're just not, they don't compact very well. They actually stay fluffy a lot, so it's not a very stable surface for the skink to be walking on. They kind of
Right.
sink to it. So what I end up doing is, or what I've ended up preferring over the years, is a sand soil mix. My current skink is on what is it? It's about a 60-40 mix of majority topsoil plus clay sand added.
Mm-hmm.
Over the while, I've kind of added some bark to that as well, and it's fully bioactive, so it's got a lot of various organic debris to help fluff it up and provide nourishment to both the plants and the critters in there.
That's amazing. And because Casey mentioned what's the best substrate for a northern blue-tongued skink, roughly how many species of blue-tongued skink are commonly available?
If you are in the US, you are going to see northerns as the most common Australian, and then
Mm-hmm.
it seems the most common Indonesian is a contest between the Maruki and the Halmahera. So both Peliqua gigas, one is Gigas evanescens, one is Gigas gigas locality, Halmahera. Occasionally you'll see a classic Indonesian. Every once in a while you'll see an Irianjaya, which don't actually have a formal taxonomic classification yet. There's definitely more Indonesian imports in the US right now than we have Australian. You can get a few others in the US. Easterns seem to be the next hot thing. I've seen a couple of breeders of Westerns, but when it comes to blotched and Odrat, only the Latin name is coming to me right now. The shingleback,
Oh, yes.
not really going to see those in the US.
Mm-hmm. Now, the shinglebacks, they're more from, I think they're actually restricted coming into the US, aren't they?
Very, yes. Because we didn't get a lot of imports of those back when Australia was exporting reptiles, we don't really have them right now. You'd have to jump through so many hoops. And there are a lot of people who try to illegally export them out of Australia. I hear
Naughty.
accounts of people smuggling them in suitcases all the time. It's horrifying, but that is the dark side of the exotic animal trade in general is illegal smuggling. So shinglebacks are definitely a very common victim of that. So if you ever see a shingleback skink, as cute as they are, for a suspiciously low price in the US, it might be an illegal export.
Yeah, so maybe let's not deal with those for anybody who's watching. Mariah, just before you mentioned bioactive substrates,
Mhm.
how do you feel about bioactive substrates in general for the blue-tongued skink?
I think they can work really well. I like them because when you're dealing with a larger enclosure, replacing all of that substrate on a regular basis is very time consuming and kind of expensive. So what I like about Bioactive is that it is lower maintenance for me in that respect. Um, and also I feel like it gives the animal a more natural environment to live in. Its scent is everywhere in the enclosure. It is very much its territory. You are never disrupting that part of the animal's life. And when I talk about scent, I don't talk about a stink. I talk about a scent that the animal recognizes as its own. It's like, when you leave for a vacation and then you come back to your house and you take a deep inhale and you're like, that's my house.
Yes.
It's the smell that you carry with you. It's not a stink. It's not necessarily a fragrance either. It's just the smell of you and your home. And that's how it is for reptiles as well.
That's fantastic. I suppose skinks love to have that little skink stink around just to make them feel really nice and at home. And I don't think that's something that most people consider when keeping them on a different kind of substrate, that every time you clean them out, you're actually taking away that comforting smell that makes them feel at home. So that's a really, really great point, Mariah. Thank you so much. Let's go on to the next question, which is which species out of the blue-tongued skinks is the most difficult in terms of husbandry?
Okay, if we narrow that down to the ones that are available in the US, Sorry to exclude anyone who's not in the US right now. Those are the ones I'm most familiar with. I'd say the Indonesians are probably the most difficult just because they have higher humidity needs and they are often imports. So they're going to be more stressed. They are more likely to come in less healthy. So you have to deal with those initial health hurdles, and taming is going to be more difficult with them. And then, of course, humidity can be really difficult to manage, especially since I live in an alpine area which has crazy low humidity. My reptile room on a regular basis gets down to 20%. That's just how it goes. So I have to combat that. And my little humidity meter that I have in here is always like giving me the frowny face. I'm like, I know. I'd love to get a humidifier in here just to bump that up a little bit. But the aromatics likes it, so that's the important thing. Better to start to go higher when you have a lot of species in the same room than start a little too humid and then have to worry about decreasing that humidity. But yeah, the Halmahera Indonesians are probably the most difficult to deal with just because, one, virtually no one I know of is breeding the Halmahera locality right now. And they require crazy high, I'm talking 80 to 100% humidity on average. So lower during the day, higher at night. There's just so much water going through that, and then trying to prevent pathogens from thriving in that super wet environment.
Right.
It can be tough, and it's a pity that those are the blue-tongued skinks that most people get their hands on first.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for that. You mentioned that the northern blue-tongued skink is the skink that we're most commonly going to find here in the American pet trade. Let's say one of our listeners and viewers goes out and purchases their first blue-tongued skink. Hopefully they've done a little bit of prep and they have a nice setup at home, or even better, a Zen Habitat. QVC model, just saying. But what would be the best way to introduce a blue-tongued skink into the family? What are some of the do's and don'ts when bringing home your first blue-tongued skink?
All right, so the first thing you want to do is make sure you have the right setup. So don't bring it home and then put it into an enclosure that is going to significantly change over the next month. Make sure you have everything ready to go. Aside from that, if you have done your prep, everything's good to go, you've tested it, you've made sure your temperatures and your UVB are within parameters, you want to make sure not to touch it. Give it at least 2 weeks to settle into its new home. It is stressful for a reptile to be suddenly transported to a new area where everything in it is saying, I don't know where anything is right now. I could get eaten. Are they just waiting to eat me? Like, there are a lot of instincts that are going on right now that don't deal well with sudden change. So letting them just calm down, get acclimated to their new environment before introducing yourself is huge, because as a very much larger animal, humans freak out reptiles. And when you bring one home, especially when they're a juvenile, as juveniles are extremely defensive, they are afraid of everything because in the wild, that's when they're most likely to get eaten. So they have these predator avoidance instincts that are just raging inside of them. So if you're chasing it around with your hand inside of the enclosure, that immediately marks you as a predator and something to be feared and avoided. So letting it settle in, not touching it, and just, like, you can watch it. You can put something that smells like you inside of its enclosure, but not touching it, not chasing it, not anything. For those first critical 2 weeks while it settles in, it starts eating, is going to be huge. Other thing is, I know I said it was important to have the right setup from the get-go, but it is important to address the matter of quarantine. So that is something that we don't do often enough in general in the reptile hobby.
Yes.
Quarantine is minimum 3 months in a fairly minimalistic environment that makes it easy for you to monitor fecal output so that you can check the texture and the color of the feces, which are often an indicator of health, that make it a little easier for you to see the animal or at least access it easily. And easy to keep, almost in hospital-like sanitation. Because this is the time when you need to be checking for parasites and clearing those out. Ideally, before a reptile clears quarantine, you want it to pass 2 parasite checks clean, because one might just hit a part of the parasite life cycle at a low point, and so you make a false negative. So you need 2 clean checks before you're good to go. And that's also just a good time to, if you have any other reptiles in your house, make sure that it's not carrying something that it could spread to the rest of your animals. Blue-tongued skinks generally don't carry things that are going to be a problem for other reptiles unless you already have other blue-tongued skinks, but it's still a precaution that's very good to take, especially in the case of, say, crypto.
Oh, absolutely. If anybody doesn't know, definitely Google Cryptosporidium. It's something that you really want to be very well aware of, and it's something that can spread very easily throughout a reptile collection. So if you are bringing home a new reptile, any new reptile, I'm sure Mariah joins me in saying that we would thoroughly recommend every reptile going through a quarantine period for sure. Moving on to the next question, what are some common ailments keepers may encounter with their blue-tongued skinks?
Let's see. The first thing we're going to say is that most problems with blue-tongued skinks are encountered because of husbandry-related problems, so they are entirely preventable. One common one I see is shedding issues. I guess I should just go through the list of what Kairos, my rescue northern, came in with.
Please.
So he was a neglect situation, and just about everything that could be wrong with him was. So one big one that you shouldn't see too often with blue-tongued skinks, but can happen and is a definite indicator of major problems with the husbandry, is metabolic bone disease. Blue-tongued skinks are commonly touted as being easier to care for because they are more tolerant of living without UVB exposure in their environment.
Right.
However, if you are not providing enough vitamin D3 or calcium supplementation as part of their diet, then not providing that supplementation plus not providing UVB lighting is just a double whammy of that. So that's one of the biggest issues, and I will say providing a supplement as a replacement for UVB lighting is an imprecise solution at best, because we don't actually know how much vitamin D3 it takes to meet a blue-tongued skink or any reptile's metabolic needs.
Right.
Because that fluctuates on a day-to-day basis depending on the age of the skink, the sex of the skink, the weight of the skink, a ton of factors. So you want to make sure to meet everything that it needs, and the most precise way to do that is by providing an appropriate amount of high quality UVB lighting.
Fantastic.
Another common problem you're going to see with blue-tongued skinks, I'd say more common than MBD, fortunately, not fortunately, is a respiratory infection. So in skinks that prefer it a little bit drier, you're going to see it develop in skinks that are exposed too high humidity, but it's not just a high humidity problem. It's also a high humidity, poor hygiene environment where bacteria is growing and they are inhaling those bacteria into their lungs. So that is a common problem for, say, it can happen with northerns, and it can happen with the humidity-loving Indonesians, where the environment is not humid enough for them to have good respiratory health. And respiratory infection is really, really broad spectrum term. I mean, it can cover any type of respiratory virus or bacteria, really. It's it's more general than saying you got it.
Wow. Oh my goodness. Well, thank you so much for that. And also to all of our Zen friends who are just joining, I can just see a nice big influx of people joining. Welcome. This is Mariah Healey of Reptifiles, and she's talking to us today about blue-tongued skinks as part of our Beyond the Care Sheet series. This is Series 1, Episode 1. Now, you've just spoken to us a little bit about the setup, the proper husbandry of a blue-tongued skink, and a little bit about blue-tongued skinks as a species and how many there are. Could you tell us a bit about their diet? Because so many people, I'm sure, get this very wrong.
It's yes and no. They are very easy to care for nutritionally. We have seen over the course of decades that blue-tongued skinks can do just fine on high-quality canned dog food.
Wow.
It's TC Houston can explain this better than I can, but the gist of it is the components of dog food are more or less similar to their wild diet in the nutritional composition. So blue-tongued skinks have been raised and bred on canned dog food successfully for, I kid you not, generations.
Wow.
So this is very well tested. You have skinks living to 30 years old on this diet.
Wow.
However, that's not it. If you want to go that route, I recommend varying the flavors and the brands that you are using to provide sensory variety and a form of enrichment to the skink. And that will also help round up the diet. The nice thing about dog food is that it's intended as a complete diet, because dogs are usually fed one thing every day for their entire lives, which is really nice. So it's more of a nice to have rather than a have to have, but I strongly recommend varying flavors, since changing flavors and changing brands is not going to upset the other things. In the wild, you're more likely to see blue-tongued skinks getting most of their protein, however, from insects, which are a much leaner form of protein than meat is. A lot less fat, so a lot less calories. And one big health problem with blue-tongued skinks is obesity. Lots of people eat their blue-tongued skinks way too much. Part of this is there are many contributors, there's the word, to this problem. One of them is too small enclosures. So you're keeping a blue-tongued skink that's 24 inches long and a 36-inch long enclosure, and say 40 gallon, and it doesn't have enough room to move and to exercise the way it instinctively wants to exercise. Even a 4x2x2, good starting point, but still could be better. Mine are kept in 4x3x2s, so that's 12 square feet. And they could still use more, absolutely. They're very active, curious little animals. So that's one part of preventing obesity. The other part is just not feeding them too much. They love to eat. Blue-tongued skinks really love to eat, and they're so cute when you give them snacks from their fingers, and they're so excited about it, but you have to be very careful about what you are feeding them. My Maruki in the rack above me is he's what's known as an easy keeper. He will get fat out there. So right now, I'm trying to figure out a better way to keep him slim, because he's down to one head-sized portion of about 60% protein, 40% vegetables per week, and he's still got like almost Teguesque jowls.
Oh my goodness.
So I'm like, dude, I don't know what to do with you. I'm trying everything, but it's something that varies from skink to skink, because my northern, I can't get enough food into him. It's very, very hard to get him to gain and keep weight on. So I'm feeding him 2-3 times a week, much more higher calorie food than I would dare give the other. And he also stops eating for months at a time in the winter. So he doesn't lose a ton of weight, but he still loses weight, and it freaks me out. So that's something to know about feeding a blue-tongued skink, is that your results will vary from individual to individual, just like humans. You can feed them a variety of insects. There are also a lot of diet powders that you can use, commercial diets. Repti has a formula called Bluey Buffet, which my northern actually adores. It's one of the few things he will consistently eat.
Wow.
which says a lot. The thing to be aware of with powder and gel diets is that they are very high calorie per unit compared to whole foods. So you actually are going to want to feed them less of that than you would a portion of, say, even dog food, and definitely less than a portion of insects and greens, because those are relatively less dense.
Okay, great. And then in terms of feeding schedule, what is the kind of schedule that people should be looking at here? Is this once a day, every day? Is it a couple of times a week? What is the optimal sort of for a healthy blue-tongue skink that's at a healthy weight? What is their sort of optimal feeding schedule?
A good starting point so if you have a baby or a very young juvenile blue-tongue skink, you're looking at daily feedings while they're growing. As they get a little older, past about a 6-month point, you can reduce that to about every other day, depending on what their body condition is looking like. And after they hit young adulthood, so that's around the 12-month point, you can scale that back to about 2 times a week, once a week, again, depending on their body condition. Each portion should be roughly the size of their skull, and that's the general rule for dog food. You can feed them a little bit more if you are using whole foods like calcium-dusted insects and a pile of grains.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for that. And let's just get real here for a second. Let's say somebody's looking at their blue-tongue skink going, oh, okay, my blue-tongue skink put on a couple of COVID grams over here. How is a person in a healthy way able to determine how to best put their blue-tongue skink on a diet? Is there a special ratio for that? Or can you just slowly cut back a little bit? Or would this send the blue-tongue skink into shock?
You definitely don't want to stop feeding it because then it's going to go into conservation mode, and it's going to just not lose any weight at all as it waits out this famine. So
Right.
what you want to do is keep feeding it consistently, but smaller portions, or reduce, if you are using dog food, maybe switch to an insect-based protein source. Higher fiber, make it work for its calories. And I know there's some people who won't like me suggesting going off the dog food. It's a little scary for some people. As long as you're keeping your ratios right and supplementing appropriately, I highly recommend the Arcadia supplementation system. They really have it all together. It is likely to be safe. Just keep an eye on their general health and their body condition. Weigh them weekly with a kitchen's gram scale and track those changes. Be aware weight loss is going to be extremely slow in reptiles. So this is something that can take over a year, depending on how much weight needs to be lost. Also encouraging them to exercise more. So that's, if you are using a smaller enclosure, upgrading to a larger enclosure will help. But also getting them out for regular supervised free roam time is also helpful. They're very curious. They love to explore. Give them an area where they can run around. So my skinks, because they can't really get into a lot of trouble, will roam around in my bedroom. And I mean, the worst they can do is like go underneath my bed. So it's easy to get them out when they have they're done hiding. Or they're done exploring and they go into hiding. They can just drag them back out and be like, all right, you've had your fun. But encouraging them to exercise in a larger space, giving them something new to explore is huge.
Yeah.
Let's see, giving them challenges, so enrichment activities. Believe it or not, my Maruki is a proficient climber.
Wow.
He has, you would never believe this, stubby little legs are so strong, but Skinks amaze me every time. I can stick him in my laundry basket with like a net-like liner, and he will do a vertical climb from the bottom of the laundry basket to the top easily. And he will do it with
footage. We need footage at some point. Next time he does it, we need footage. Please tag Zen. We would love to share that.
Oh man, I think there's actually footage in my YouTube channel is extremely neglected. However, I do have a video on there about enrichment for lizards, and there is a clip in that video of him climbing out of a laundry basket.
Oh, amazing. Well, we're actually going to discover a little bit more about your socials in a little while so that everybody knows where to actually find you for more of this incredible information. But we do have actually another question here, which is going to be our last question from the pre-prepared questions. So if
Mhm.
anybody has a particular blue tongue skink question, feel free to drop it down below. We might have time for one or two of those. But the most common question I had, so many people ask this, is say you rescue a blue tongue skink or you purchase one, how can you really tell what gender your, or sorry, what sex your blue tongue skink is? How do you actually sex a blue tongue skink?
The simple answer is you can't.
Wow, okay, that's
This is a
unexpected.
very common problem with blue tongue, just skinks in general. Actually, they're very good at hiding their biological sex. And it's a real problem for people who want to get into breeding. The good news is that blue tongue skinks aren't particularly social, so you don't have to like worry about dumping a bunch of them into an enclosure and then being like, well, I want a group, but I don't want babies.
Mm.
That's a more difficult issue whenever you're dealing with a live bearer, right? And that's the issue I deal with my ocellated skinks. But with blue tongue skinks, fortunately, since they're pretty happy living solitary, that's not an issue, and it's more of a it's a thing that most humans just like to do because we like to know the sex of our pets, usually for naming reasons. Aside from that, if you are can reconcile yourself to the fact that you just might have an it for a long time until you figure out otherwise, there's that. The good news is males drop sperm plugs when they
Right.
are actually mature. So that's going to be a very sure indicator that you have a male. Not all males will drop.
Hmm.
My Maruki did not drop sperm plugs until we got the Northern, about
Wow.
6 months later.
Mm-hmm.
So we thought he was male, then we thought he was female because we also put him with a known male in a supervised environment to see
Mm-hmm.
how they would react. Because if it
Wow.
was male, there should be hostile behavior between the two. If it was male and female, then the male should pursue and the female should more or less run away.
Mm-hmm.
So we tried that method. He ran away. He's very submissive. So we were like, oh, okay, well, it must be female. And then we got our male Northern, and he could just, he knew immediately that there was a male blue tongue skink in the same room because it was night and day difference. He started acting more territorial. He started dropping sperm plugs. It was crazy. So
Wow.
some there are it's never for certain, but you can, and depending on your exotic vet, you may be able to get contrast radiography done if you really want to know because you want to, if you're considering breeding, they will inject dye into the cloaca area, and the area will fluoresce under X-ray. And
Wow.
it will fill in the gaps. So if there is an area for hemipenes, then it will show up on the X-ray as, okay, there is room for hemipenes here, therefore it's male. Alternatively, there's no room for hemipenes here, therefore it's male. And so that's the most accurate, least invasive way to do it. Definitely don't try probing a blue tongue skink, you're going to injure them.
Wow, that is such great advice because most people who keep reptiles, they might think, well, the way that you sex a snake is by probing or popping, but you're saying don't do either of those, correct?
No. No, lizards are very different from snakes, and honestly, even in snakes, popping is a questionable practice.
Absolutely, especially in terms of arboreal species where it can do some really harsh damage to a snake before it's even reached sexual maturity and even after
Mhm.
that.
Yeah.
Mariah, I think I can speak for everybody who is here in the chat that we have learned so much from you. Thank you so much for sharing all of this incredible knowledge. And oh my goodness, I'm just so excited that you have a blue tongue skink back there. I just want to know, before we let you go, first of all, thank you so much, but where can we find you and find out more about Reptifiles?
All right. So, first of all, my main platform is reptifiles.com. That is where I post all of my care guides. I'm also working on building up a care sheet database. So even though care sheets are not ideal, I have recognized a significant need for quality care sheets on the internet. So that is how I'm building up a database of information on a wider variety of species than I could do otherwise with just the care guides, which are quite time consuming. There's also blog posts on there on a variety of subjects pertaining to reptile keeping in general. In terms of social media, I am present on Facebook and Instagram. Instagram is where I post photos of my personal collection. Facebook is usually where I share valuable resources on reptile keeping.
Amazing. Thank you so much. You also mentioned you had a YouTube channel, is that correct?
Yeah, I have a baby YouTube channel that has a couple of things on it. It's not quite live yet. I will let everyone know. You will hear for sure when there is a lot, when I'm finally focusing my energy on that. I can provide a teaser. In the future, my YouTube channel will be including a series of Ask Reptifiles-esque videos. So if you're familiar with my website, I have an Ask Reptifiles form where you can submit questions to me via email, and I will answer them. I realized that having all of these questions that I've answered and answering them privately is not very beneficial to people as a whole. There are a lot of questions that I answer repeatedly. So I want to help people out and just answer some of the more common questions in a more public environment. So that's going to be, I think most of the videos I'm going to be doing on YouTube will just be answering common questions about reptile keeping, and occasionally also doing live sessions where maybe for half an hour to an hour I just take people's questions and answer them in real time.
Amazing. Mariah, thank you so much for taking this time out of your evening to just help to spread such great knowledge about blue-tongue skinks. Everybody, please do make sure to go and check out Mariah on her socials so that you can stay tuned for her upcoming YouTube channel. And thank you all so much for joining. It's been such a pleasure to have you, Mariah. Thank you so much.
It's been fun.
Great. Well, thank you so much. And we'll see you soon, Mariah. Take care.
All right. Bye.
All right, everybody. Well, that was Mariah of Reptifiles. I hope that you learned a ton from this very first Series 1, Episode 1 of Beyond the Care Sheet. If you want to go and find out a little bit more about blue-tongue skinks, you can also do that by going on the Zen Habitats website, where we do also have care sheets, as well as a 4x2x2 PVC panel enclosure, which also comes with an extension kit. So if you want to have a really nice big enclosure, which is going to be a full life solution for your blue-tongue skink, feel free to go over onto the website as well. I'm Em, I've been your host, and I will catch you in the next one. So make sure that you are following on Zen Habitats and are looking out for the very next episode. Take care, everyone. Bye.